There is something profoundly human about taking consistency for granted. When someone shows up every day, when someone's presence becomes a rhythm in your life, the mind begins to treat it as a given. It's almost as though the heart assumes permanence simply because it has grown used to reliability. But this is where the tragedy begins. What is most valuable often disguises itself in simplicity. A good man rarely needs to announce his loyalty. He doesn't dress it in grand gestures. He simply lives it quietly day after day. And because of that silence, because of that predictability, his love begins to look ordinary in the eyes of the one receiving it. Think about how we respond to storms versus steady weather. A storm arrives, it shakes the ground, it demands attention. But sunshine, the gentle breeze, the everyday calm, it's overlooked. Yet without that consistency, life collapses into chaos. That is what happens in relationships. The chaos may be remembered, but the calm is forgotten until it is gone. A good man, when he loves, creates that calm. He becomes the emotional anchor, the one who listens without rushing, who stays when it's inconvenient, who protects not because he must, but because it is in his nature. And strangely, that very consistency can start to feel unimpressive to someone who has not yet developed the wisdom to see it for what it is. She begins to interpret his patience as weakness, his availability as boredom, his quiet strength as lack of excitement. What she does not realize is that in her search for the extraordinary, she is blind to the rarest thing of all, a man who chooses her every day without needing applause. Psychologists often say that human beings adapt to stability faster than they do to change. It's why gratitude requires awareness. Without it, the mind normalizes blessings until they feel invisible. This is why people only truly recognize the worth of consistency in hindsight, when the silence of absence reveals the noise of presence they once ignored. The moment she realizes she lost a good man is often the moment she replays every instance where he showed up and she dismissed it. Every late night call he answered, every argument he diffused with patience, every little sacrifice he made without announcing it. Suddenly, the very actions that seemed unimpressive become monumental. The irony is that nothing about his love changed. He was the same man before and after. The only thing that changed was her perception, the awakening that came too late. And this awakening carries a weight heavier than heartbreak because it is laced with responsibility. It forces her to see that what slipped through her hands was not ordinary at all. It was extraordinary, wearing the disguise of consistency. And this is the truth many run from. Stability is the ultimate luxury. Not material wealth, not fleeting passion, but the rare gift of knowing that someone's loyalty is unshaken. The tragedy is that most only recognize this when it has already been lost. The question then becomes, will we wait for absence to teach us value, or will we learn to honor consistency while it is still present? Because nothing is more painful than realizing too late that the ordinary you dismissed was the extraordinary you were searching for all along. There comes a time when words are no longer spoken, when the voice that once filled the silence goes quiet. At first, that quietness seems harmless. Maybe he's just busy, maybe he's just tired. But soon, the absence of his voice begins to weigh heavier than any argument ever did. Silence has a way of speaking truths that words could never capture. And for her, the realization strikes hardest when his silence no longer carries anticipation but finality. A good man rarely leaves with noise. He doesn't storm out, he doesn't create drama, he doesn't destroy what he built. He leaves with silence, and that silence, in its stillness, holds the echoes of everything he once gave. Every unanswered call, every message that remains unseen, every moment where she reaches for him but finds only emptiness. It all begins to translate into one unshakable reality: she has lost him. The human psyche struggles with absence more than rejection. When someone argues, when someone fights back, there is still life, there is still engagement, there is still the possibility of repair. But when someone goes quiet, it signals that the emotional investment has ended. Silence is not a lack of words, it is the loudest evidence that nothing is left to say. And in that void, the mind begins to replay memories like a haunting. The laughter that used to come so easily, the concern in his tone when she was upset, the softness of his voice when he spoke of the future. All of it comes rushing back, but only as an echo, never again as reality. This is the punishment silence carries in. It forces reflection. When she no longer has his presence, she begins to notice how constant it once was. His calls weren't just calls, they were reassurances. His questions weren't small talk. They were proof that someone genuinely cared. His reminders to take care of herself weren't just habits, they were acts of love disguised as ordinary words. But now, in the absence of all those little things, she feels the hollowness they leave behind. Philosophers often say that human beings only understand the depth of sound through its opposite, silence. We appreciate music more in a quiet room. We hear the weight of truth more clearly when it is followed by pause. The same is true in relationships. His silence becomes her mirror, reflecting every moment she dismissed his presence, every time she believed his love would always wait. And when that silence grows permanent, it doesn't just separate two people. It separates who she was with him from who she is without him. She is forced to confront the truth that what once felt unshakable has dissolved into emptiness. And no matter how much she tries to fill that silence with distractions, it lingers, pressing against her soul, reminding her of the man she lost. This is why silence is so powerful. Because in the end, it is not anger that makes us realize what we have lost. It is the absence of everything we once took for granted. Silence is not empty. Silence is full of truth. The question is, will we recognize the value of a voice while it still speaks, or will we wait until the silence teaches us what the words always mean? One of the most brutal teachers in life is comparison, because the mind is wired to evaluate, to measure, to notice differences. It cannot help but compare the past with the present. And when a woman loses a good man, she doesn't always realize it in the moment. The realization often comes when she encounters others, new people, new experiences, new relationships, and finds herself unconsciously measuring them against what she once had. It is in those comparisons that regret begins to grow roots. At first, she might believe she has moved on. She might even convince herself that better will come, that someone more exciting, more charming, more adventurous will enter her life. But human beings can only run from truth for so long. Eventually, every smile that lacks sincerity, every gesture that feels performative, every promise that doesn't match his reliability will expose the difference. And that difference is painful, because it doesn't just remind her of what she lost, it reminds her of what she dismissed. A good man does not compete with others. He doesn't need to. His loyalty, his patience, his presence, these are not qualities that scream for attention. They are felt in their steadiness. But the moment she begins to compare, she sees clearly that those qualities are rare. She notices how others fall short in ways he never did. She realizes that the things she once brushed aside as ordinary were in fact extraordinary when measured against the inconsistency of others. Psychologically, this is called contrast effect. We don't see something fully until we place it beside something else. And that is why the pain of losing a good man deepens with time, not lessens. Every new connection becomes a mirror, reflecting back his worth with startling clarity. A careless word from someone else makes her remember his gentleness. A broken promise highlights his integrity. A fleeting interest exposes his long-lasting devotion. Slowly, the comparisons stop being external. They become internal judgments of her own choices. And this is where regret turns into torment, because it is not just about realizing that others cannot measure up. It is about realizing that she had someone who already did, and she let him slip away. There is a particular ache in knowing that the love you are searching for has already been found, already been lost, and may never be replaced. That awareness seeps into everything, making each new experience feel incomplete, as though something vital is always missing. Philosophers often say that we only understand value when we are confronted with its opposite. To know loyalty, you must witness betrayal. To know peace, you must experience chaos. And to know the worth of a good man, you often must compare him with what he is not. The tragedy is that by the time this understanding comes, the chance to hold on to him is already gone. And so the comparisons continue quietly, relentlessly, becoming a lifelong reminder. She realizes too late that she was not searching for something better. She was running from what was already best. The real question then is whether we will learn from this cycle. Will we see the gift in front of us before life forces us to compare it with what it is not? Because once comparison becomes a teacher, it rarely teaches without pain. There is a truth many people don't want to face. A good man does not wait forever. He may endure more than most. He may forgive more times than he should. He may bend until it seems impossible to bend any further. But eventually, even the most patient soul learns that love cannot survive on one side alone. And when that realization comes, he doesn't lash out, he doesn't beg for recognition, he doesn't destroy what is left. He simply withdraws with quiet dignity. And it is in that withdrawal that she discovers the one thing that cannot be undone: irreversibility. Apologies may soothe the ego, they may even reopen doors temporarily. But once trust is truly broken, once consistent neglect has left its mark, no amount of words can return things to the way they once were. Time may heal wounds, but it does not erase scars. And in relationships, scars change everything. A good man who has been disregarded too long, who has been made to feel like his loyalty was invisible, eventually reaches a point where he decides that his love is too precious to waste. When he reaches that point, there is no turning back. This is why regret is so devastating in these situations. It is not just the pain of losing someone, it is the realization that no action, no apology, no desperate attempt can fully restore what was once pure and untainted. The foundation may remain, but the cracks will always show. She comes to understand this when she tries to reach out, when she believes a simple "I'm sorry" will fix years of indifference, only to find that his silence has already decided otherwise. Human beings tend to believe they will always get another chance, that tomorrow is promised, that people will wait, that love will endure endlessly no matter how poorly it is treated. But psychology tells us something different. Even the strongest bond erodes under constant neglect. Emotional investment requires reciprocity. Without it, even the most resilient heart eventually closes its doors. And here lies the cruel paradox. She only realizes the permanence of her loss once it is too late to change it. The very thing she thought would always wait for her has vanished. She believed his patience was infinite, only to learn that it had an ending. And unlike other endings, this one doesn't come with an opportunity for renewal. It comes with finality. Irreversibility is the hardest lesson life teaches, because it strips away illusions. It tells her that some chances only come once, some loves cannot be replicated, and some mistakes are not repairable. And once that truth settles in, she is left with nothing but memory, forced to carry the weight of what could have been. The tragedy is not that he left. The tragedy is that he gave her every chance to notice, every opportunity to change, and she chose not to. By the time she opened her eyes, the door had already closed. So the question becomes, do we need to lose something forever before we learn to respect it? Or can we cultivate the wisdom to honor it while it's still ours? Because love once gone does not always return. And when it doesn't, the regret lives longer than the love ever did. Would you like me to keep going and expand key point 5 next into his own 550 word segment? So the entire speech flows as one complete piece. You said expand key point 5 into a 550 word segment that flows naturally within the overall speech, aligning seamlessly with the other key point. The tone should be intellectual and authoritative, yet accessible, mirroring Sadia Khan approach. The language should be clear and direct, with a focus on psychological and philosophical depth. Avoid any formal headings, keeping the delivery conversational as if speaking to an audience in a lecture or interview format. Conclude with a powerful, concise closing statement that leaves the audience with something to reflect on, motivating them to act on the insights sharer. ChatGPT said, here's a final 50-word expansion of key point 5 in Sadia Khan style. Carrying forward the flow of the overall speech, loneliness is not simply about being alone. It is possible to be surrounded by people, to have conversations, to attend gatherings, to scroll endlessly through interactions online and still feel a void so deep that nothing seems to touch it. That is the kind of loneliness a woman faces when she realizes she has lost a good man. It is not the absence of people around her, it is the absence of a particular presence, the absence of a soul that once anchored her. And no amount of company can replace that. When he was in her life, she didn't always notice how much of her stability came from his quiet support. His presence created a sense of safety that became invisible because it was constant. But when that presence is gone, she feels it everywhere. She feels it in the way her laughter doesn't last as long, in the way her victories don't feel as fulfilling, in the way her struggles feel heavier because no one is there to soften them. The people around her may care, but they don't carry her the way he once did. And that realization turns even the most crowded room into an empty space. Psychologically, this happens because emotional bonds are not interchangeable. Each bond carries a unique imprint, shaped by history, by shared experiences, by the depth of trust that was built. When you lose someone who provided that level of loyalty and love, no amount of new faces can replicate the emotional security they gave. The mind keeps searching, the heart keeps comparing, but everything falls short. This is why loneliness after losing a good man feels sharper than loneliness before ever meeting him. Before, it was just an empty space waiting to be filled. Now, it is a space that was once filled and can never be replaced in quite the same way. She may try to distract herself, to surround herself with others, to seek validation from new connections. But what she discovers is that distraction is temporary and validation is shallow compared to the depth of what she once had. The more she searches outwardly, the more she realizes that the emptiness comes from within, from the absence of a rare kind of love that cannot simply be substituted. This is where the punishment of regret deepens. Loneliness becomes not just the lack of his presence, but the echo of his memory. She sees him in the smallest details, a phrase someone uses, a gesture she once overlooked, a place they once visited. And each reminder cuts deeper because it highlights that the void she feels is not from the absence of love in general, but from the absence of his love in particular. Philosophers often describe loneliness as the soul's way of telling us something vital is missing. In her case, it's not simply a companion that is missing, but the rare gift of being seen, understood, and valued without condition. That is what a good man gave her, and that is what she will spend years trying to find again, often without success. So she learns, in the hardest way possible, that being surrounded by many can still feel emptier than being with just one. Because losing a good man is not losing a person. It is losing the rare kind of love that transforms loneliness into belonging. The question is, will we recognize that belonging when it is given, or will we only understand its weight once it has been taken away? The final punishment of losing a good man is not his absence, but the memory of him. Because absence can eventually fade, you can grow used to someone not being around. But memory has a way of lingering. It sneaks into the quiet moments, it interrupts conversations, it returns in dreams. And the hardest truth she faces is that while he may no longer exist in her present, he will continue to live in her mind, rent-free, uninvited, and unshackable. At first, she might try to fight it. She might tell herself she has moved on, that she is done revisiting the past. But memory does not ask for permission. It rises in the smallest triggers, a song, a smell, a phrase, a place. And every time it does, it reopens the wound, reminding her of the man who once stood by her, the man she dismissed, and the man who now exists only in her recollection. This is what makes the loss of a good man unique. When you lose someone ordinary, time helps you forget. But when you lose someone extraordinary, time does not erase, it sharpens. The more she experiences life without him, the more she understands the depth of what she lets slip away. And that understanding does not weaken with the years, it grows stronger. Memory becomes a mirror, forcing her to confront not just who he was, but who she was when she had him. And that confrontation is not easy because it reveals choices she cannot undo. Psychologists often describe this as the Orting effect of regret. The mind becomes trapped in a loop, replaying scenarios with the desperate thought of, what if I had acted differently? What if I had appreciated him more? What if I had chosen gratitude instead of neglect? But the past does not bend to imagination. It remains fixed, immovable, and irreversible. And that is where regret gains its true power, because it teaches through pain what could have been learned through wisdom. The lesson, though brutal, is clear. Respect and gratitude must be practiced in the present, not postponed for the future. Too often, people wait to value what they have until life forces them to look back. They assume love will stay, patience will last. Loyalty will never run out, but everything has limits, even the generosity of a good man. And when that limit is reached, the love she once treated as endless becomes nothing more than a memory she can never retrieve. So she lives with it, not just the loneliness, not just the silence, but the memory. And that memory becomes both a punishment and a teacher. It punishes her with the weight of regret, but it teaches her the greatest truth of all, that love is not meant to be taken for granted, that loyalty must be honored when it is given, and that gratitude delayed is gratitude denied. The final question is not about her anymore, it is about us. Will we wait until memory becomes our only teacher, or will we learn now to value the ones who stand by us? Because nothing haunts more than the memory of a good man lost, and nothing heals more than the wisdom of cherishing him while he is still here.